a supermajority. There's a lot of things to think about if you go beyond that 50%. But our thinking at this point is those first three go a long ways in helping to close that gap. It's almost $800,000, just those three as they stand. Some of the lesser, if you will, lesser, and I don't mean to be derogatory towards anybody or programs, are the next 4 to 5 to 6, 7. The swim program through transportation for that program, the allocations 10% for planners, things of that nature. There has been some freezing of salaries already. We have reduced administrative staff again through the CIO. And then you start getting into the more nitty-gritty. Those are the ones that are painful ones. As I said before, with the board, I appreciate the board reauthorizing the retirement incentive this evening. We believe that that will have a positive impact. We don't know that for a fact. We're only hearing what we're hearing from different individuals, from unit leaders who are suggesting that they've spoken to people in their different units who have expressed an interest. If that happens, that's a positive. Those are all positives, because that then means we don't have to impact the person coming out the door. We can do it through an attrition process. And I know talking to unit presidents, I know all of them would agree that would be the most advantageous way to do that. So it's not an easy conversation that we have had and will continue to have. But again, we wanted to kind of chunk it out and present it to the board as where we think we are pretty much at this point. We're not cement 100% on all these issues, but we think we're coming fairly close to in our own minds as to what we might be coming back to the board saying we would recommend you consider the following to go to your budget. We also wanted to talk with the board that has the desire about future planning. One of the topics that we had shared with the BAC, which caused quite a bit of introspection, and that is the issue of further consolidation of our campuses. You don't see it on your list tonight. It's purposely not on your list tonight, because we don't believe at this point that it's necessarily something that we have to strive for. It doesn't mean that we don't necessarily think down the road that it may be something that the district may want to research and entertain and seek further input, but we're not thinking, based on what we have in front of you this evening, that that's something we have to do particularly at this time. So we can have some conversation. We've collected some data. I know Mrs. Stewart shared some information with us at the last meeting. We can verbalize some of those things. Requested. But in all fairness, there's a lot on that list in a very short period of time, and I'm not crying the blues. To pull that kind of data together really was, in our mind, does the board truly want us to proceed as an issue we're going to put on here as a consideration, or is it something which we would suggest maybe be something we look at down the road? If you remember the last time we did the consolidation with Highland, we did have CASPOs, we did have input from community, we did take the time to research that. So if you want, we can have that conversation. If not, we can move on. So tell me what you want to do.
I think it's important for the board to see that information, because it is a very big decision for the board to make, and you can't just make it based on, in my opinion, an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that says, this is what we can save. There's so many things that impact.
There are, but I guess my point is this: if it's not going to be considered to be put to the budget this year, then move it to the next topic.
It could be a very good thing,
well,
but we don't know that
until
we see the information.
So we have, let me send these up.
That was just my
What we've tried to do is, first question we had on the list was, first and foremost, schedule town hall meetings, community meetings, inform parents, taxpayers about the potential closing and its impact. We could do that based on our calculations. If the board wants us to do it, we'd be more than happy to have that conversation. A 3-year financial plan showing all cost savings itemized by category. As we looked at that conversation, as I believe we suggested to the board, this is really a one-time, if you will, one-shot savings if we were to consolidate and close that facility or use it in a different fashion. Oh. Oh, okay, well, then we misunderstood what that said.
Same thing that I think several other people have.
Yeah, because it didn't say for Fletcher, it said a 3-year financial plan showing all cost savings.
Okay, well, we can do that. Consensus, or census projections for the next 5 years. In your packet, we have I think it's the last sheet, second last sheet. We have a cohort survival study that we've put together, which we've talked about before. And if you go all the way down to 2021, we project, at least on our numbers, that at that point, the district's total student population will be about 1,672 pupils. So we have that information for you that you certainly can go through and pull apart and look at. If you want further information, we can do that too. The next question was the Hines. Sharon, you mentioned that earlier. We have had tentative conversations. We are asking, and we'll be asking for something in writing from them as to what their projections look like. From our numbers of registration and kids coming to the district, we do not see a huge spike, but that is something we're still waiting to have some information from that housing development as to what impact that may have. The next one was research that provides both the educational advantage and disadvantage to moving grade 5 into the middle school, as well as the social and emotional impact. We could probably talk about just that topic for the rest of tonight. We can tell you that there are other districts just in our own backyard that are extremely high-performing districts that have 5 through 8 middle schools. And 5th grades are already in their buildings. They've had, from my understanding, no problems with social or emotional or any other impacts on the kids. But if you want, we can pull together a bevy of information on research of middle schools. Middle schools, again, if you go back historically, middle schools transitioned from original junior highs, which once upon a time, when I was in school, were 7-9s, and then they became 7-9 buildings in a lot of cases, and then they morphed into 6-8s, and sometimes they morphed into 5-8s. So a lot of the times, when you look at how you're going to use your buildings, I hate to suggest this, it's not always based on the educational programs and benefits, it's based on facilities. At least some districts. Next question was details on whether 5th grade students will be placed in the middle school or going to be separated from lower students. In our conversations this last year with Jim in particular, we have had that conversation, and certainly one of his considerations and concerns is how can we best, if that ever happened, bring the 5s into this building. He believes that he can isolate those children. This building is a huge complex. He believes that he has the room in the building, particularly with our numbers, that he can put them into the building so that we are isolated as much as possible, similar to what the 6th graders are right now. If you know where the 6s are, they're at the front of the building on the bottom wing, Larry, or the top? Top floor. We've talked about maybe putting the 5s below them on that first floor. There's also been a suggestion that we maybe take the first Lego and put the 5s in the first Lego upstairs, so we really isolated. So we have talked about that. Certainly no concrete plan as to yes or no, but we have looked at this. Busing plans. Joe, you want to talk about busing for a second?
Look at where we are currently and where we would probably need to be just based on numbers. We're currently using 4 buses at Mullen and 5 at Riverview. If we were to add the 4s to that, we would probably need to increase the buses to 5 and 6, a total of 11 versus the 9. Currently in the secondary complex, it's like there's 6 middle, 3 high school. We probably have to up that as well to 11. And you could configure those any way you wanted. If you didn't want to put the 5s on with the older kids, you could have separate buses just for them. It would eliminate the use of 7 buses at Fletcher, and because we have the disparity in start times, there wouldn't be any problem with routes being a little bit longer. It would also help us with St. Francis in terms of the 3 buses that they use. You could more or less dictate to them that their start time should be something in the middle. They currently start at 8:05, and that would work really well with the disparity between the secondary start time and the primary start times. So we would be able to accommodate it with the current fleet. We'd have to, there'd be a lot of rerouting going on in terms of who was on which bus. But it is well within the parameters of the buses that we're currently using. We'll just have to be, like I said, basically a total rerouting of where the kids would come from. Not too dissimilar to what we have now, because Fletcher's sort of a central location, so that the buses run on both sides of town, if you will. Given that we're 300 miles from Fletcher, that same process would be used. And, like I said, the 4s would stay down, the 5s would come up, and we would just reconfigure what those buses look like, but we wouldn't need to add any. And there might be some savings once we looked at the numbers and looked at how many kids are on the bus, but based on the routes and how many kids are currently on the buses, we definitely would need to add, buses at each end. But we'd save the 7 buses that we use for Fletcher, we wouldn't have a need for those, so there would be some impact there. It would be quite the what-if scenario, to go through that, but that would be quite the what-if scenario to go through. But basically, look at the city as having a line down the middle that we currently have, and the kids would be transported accordingly.
The administration, excellent administrative model for middle school complex. In our initial conversations, we have contemplated the fact with the number of students that would be in the building, grade 5, 8, and 9, 12, that we would probably be recommending a principal per each and with an assistant principal. At least at this point, there'd be a principal in the middle and a principal in the high school.
Like an assistant between the two,
An
not
assistant.
assistant each one?
An assistant for each at this
So
point.
2 and 2,
Yeah.
okay.
And I think Mary Beth talked before about guidance department, will they be taking on the 5th grades? They're already doing that to some degree now.
Yeah, or maybe a line right now with the social worker.
Joe just talked about the proposed attendance also, and again, this is all at this point speculative, but an easy way, I suppose, to just think about it, at least at this point, is we would take the district and slice it down the center and break them off by Mullen and Riverview as best we possibly can. In your packet are some real rough drawings of what Mullen and Riverview will look like. We've talked with Claudia and Jessica as to whether they feel they can make this happen, help it happen.
Actually, what you have, the drawings that you have are what it looks like right now.
What it looks like.
So if you were to take Mullen, for example, if you, up in the upper left-hand corner, in the current sections that we have, there are 3 sections of pre-K, 3 sections of K, 3 sections of 1, 3 sections of 2, and 4 sections of 3. And those teachers are placed in their rooms, and you'll see, like, going across the top, 109 is grade 2, and 107 is grade 3. So we plugged all of those in, and we currently have, at Mullen, there's 2 empty rooms. They're not empty, they're being used, 116 and 117. They're being used for AAS and reading. In the original suggestion was that if we moved pre-K to Fletcher, that would clear up 2 rooms that you can see, 123 and 125. Those 2 rooms would become available, as well as the 2 rooms that we're using for those other items. We still would have an art room. We still have the other rooms. So, just to give you an idea, looking at the 2 schematics for the 2 schools, the people in the lower right-hand corner, these are specials. These are people that are doing AIS or doing music or doing special needs that don't have a room per se, are floating around the building. But we, basically what I did was I looked at who's teaching what room number are they in, and just plugged them in just to see how it all laid out. At Riverview, 143 is probably, Claudia, who's in 143?
I'm sorry,
Right next to the,
Oh, that's the art room, that's across.
okay, I thought 130 was the art room. So who's in 130? Up in the top?
It's,
That, yes, that is.
That's the,
very Donovan.
okay, so I have that one. So that's the reading room, and there's a 1 pre-K room at Riverview. So just laying it out and looking at the possibilities as to what would be available, space-wise in the 2 primary buildings. So, is it doable? Yeah. Do you want to do it? Not right now, we don't have to. But it could be, they could be put in the buildings. There's actually physical space to do it.
the other questions were on enrollments, projected, class sizes, we already presented a lot of that information tonight. Joe just talked about art and music. Our hope at this point, if it were ever to come to be, they would be not on carts. And I guess the last question is, what's our long-term plan for our schools? Well, it's precocious on my part, I guess, to suggest what the long-range plan is. I do think that the board, if the board has an interest, we would be more than delighted to start putting more data together, bring more people to the conversation, have long-term conversations as to what the footprint will look like. We think from a purely a fiscal perspective, there are some positives to it. It's not just the Fletcher, it's also the Central. We have started to look at that issue as to what if we were to just shutter Central would have to happen. We believe we have perhaps some space in this building, maybe, that we can use for the record retention type of a situation. But the bigger issue with Central right now is all the stock that we have down the basement. None of the other buildings in our district have the type of basement structure that Central has, which is advantageous. On the other hand, Central is beginning to, no pun intended, show her age, and we're beginning to see things from a structural perspective and an efficiency operation perspective really begin to be problematic for us. So if the board would like us to, we can continue to pursue that and come back with further commentation on that. But as Joe just said, from a building the budget process this year, we believe we have enough pieces for the board to perhaps look at without putting that on the table at this point. If they'd like to, that's certainly up to the board. And if the board would like us to further research it and start that conversation, we can do that as well.
Just if I may, the top page, it had the consolidation scenario and then the central decommission. And then there's another page in the package that shows estimated profit and loss from Central School. It looks like there's a disconnect there. And because the central decommission shows, if you just close Central, say we just decided we're gonna close Central, it shows a $29,000 savings in the first year and a $20,000 savings in the second year. But then when you look at the other sheet, it's showing that we're losing $111,000 or $112,000 on Central. What would happen is if we were to decommission Central, there is some bumping that would take place. So it wouldn't be the person who's currently at Central losing their job, it would be someone somewhere else. So the cost would be less in terms of the people cost, in terms of the decommissioning. So just, you look at it and say, all right, these numbers don't match, it doesn't make any sense. It's because of that bumping that takes place. There's a very senior staff member at Central right now, but that person would bump up the most junior person that we had in the district. So you can see the disparity and basically in the wages between those two people. So you just so you know, and then the central decommission, if we were to get out of Central, it's something that would probably take, based on our experience with our other buildings, a couple of years. So the first column